after superstar tweeted about the lack of certainty about the health and safety protocols as they head into training camp. Jalen, this is a huge concern for the NFL, so much so that they've set a meeting for today where they are now behind closed doors trying to finalize the policy with the NFLPA. What do you think is going to happen next?
It's not a business, man. It's a business, man. And basically what we're seeing the employees, in this case the NFL players, do is acknowledge to its corporation or bosses, we're ready, willing, and able to come to work and or accept our paying check for doing our work. However, where our work isn't giving me suitable conditions that make me feel comfortable to choose between my health or my well-being. So now, NFL, your move. The players are acknowledging that they're willing to play, but you're not giving them conditions that make them comfortable. So therefore, still give me my check and eliminate these preseason games that are unnecessary. And let's get right to the good part.
Well, I think when you compare what the NBA has done to what the NFL has done, it's really night and day. The NBA set up a bubble environment. They reduced the number of teams, reduced the number of games. Obviously, they had half a season done so they could do so. But the NFL is just such a different type of sport. The cities are spread so far apart. The teams are so big. It takes so many people just to get an NFL game done that there's inherent dangers. And many of the teams are right in the hot zones where COVID-19 is tearing through communities. This is going to be a truncated season, a stop and start season. There's going to be positive test after positive test. And one of the things that the players are asking for is to be tested every day, and they are not even getting that. This is going to be a huge problem to keep an eye on when the players report to camp. But one thing we like to keep an eye on, a gentleman by the name of Patrick Mahomes. Where my homies?
Where my homies? Where they at? Where they at?
And one thing I love about Patrick Mahomes is just the flair that he brings to the quarterback position. And take a look at this video. Behind the back, wall dropping back on a dime. There's like a wide receiver screen. Now, Jalen, could be unnecessary, but do you think he will actually pull this off in a game?
So I got a controversial take, Jacoby.
Oh,
by the way,
okay.
I don't think he'll try that in the game, because if the ball doesn't get towards the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a scoop and score for the defense. That right there has been great footage that we've run time and time again. And I remember being on Get Up arguing that Patrick Mahomes was going to be a superstar when somebody ranked him one of the lower 5 quarterbacks in the whole NFL. But this behind-the-back pass with a football is overrated. It's overrated.
Oh.
You give me a football,
I disagree.
You give me a basketball, you know I could do that.
I disagree.
You know I
disagree.
could do that.
Oh, I was
So
on the beach doing that yesterday.
If I feel like I can do something, and I know I'm not special, I guess I assume that whatever the person did wasn't special either. That's easy, dog.
Well, it's what he does in the game, though, because you take a look at some of the flair that he's brought with the left-handed pass and the no-look passes.
I'm talking about that. I'm talking about
that is not that hard. That what you just saw, I was doing on the beach yesterday with pretty good accuracy, and I'm just a 42-year-old washed-up dude. Like, let's be honest. But I would love to see him do it in a game. I would love to see him do it in a game. So we're going to see this
time and time again on every network. But that's easy. That's easy right there. Not a no-look pass he did in the game. That's something I could never do. But that right there, you and I know I could do that.
Absolutely. Jalen, you have a vote for the MVP of the NBA, and we've learned over the weekend that the final 8 games in the regular season will not be taken into account when it comes to voting for these awards. I have the King LeBron James as the clear MVP. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo. What do you think you will do when the ballot comes to your inbox?
Frank Vogel came out and said it recently about each of these guys, in particular LeBron being the MVP, because nobody affects winning the way he does. So for Jacoby, basketball pickup expert, let me tell you something as an NBA fan. LeBron James and Giannis, if you wanted to compare the two and talk about affecting winning, LeBron James is second on his team in points. He's second on his team probably in rebounds, right? Second or third in points, second or third in steals and blocks. The point is Giannis is first in all of those categories on this team. And LeBron is first in the West. Giannis, first overall in the league. And for NBA to think that we're going to watch the last 8 games and not take them into account for our awards, what if one of those guys goes out and averages 50 and the other guys only plays 2 games and load manages 6 times? You don't think that's going to be in the back of people's minds? Of course it is.
Aren't you going to be forced to vote before those 8 games start, Jalen? Or do you just not have these details because you don't read your emails?
Well, I read my emails, and as soon as they send the ballot, I'll vote. I have not been sent the ballot with a deadline on it. So I don't care who it is in the industry. They ain't voted either.
I always like that day because you get a little stressed out that you're going to like mess up the tech and not get it in on time. You always get a little stressed out. You always get a little stressed out that day of the year. And
you got to do all defense. You got to do it. Yeah. I take it serious, man. It's these guys' livelihood, man. It's these guys' livelihood. I gotta take that serious.
Well, take it serious because LeBron James himself said today that he's the MVP, and I believe he's the MVP. Moving on. Carmelo Anthony has gotten down to 230 pounds during the quarantine. I might go up to 230 pounds during the quarantine, but that's another story for another day. But he says it is the thinnest that he has been since he was a young man in the league. You love the Trailblazers as a sort of dark horse puncher's chance threat in the West. What do you think about Melo's conditioning and the Blazers' shot at making some noise in Orlando?
One of the greatest compliments you could pay a seasoned future Hall of Fame vet like Carmelo Anthony right now is to call him Skinny Melo. Because usually for basketball players, especially when they retire, as you know, enter Kangaroo Jalen, basketball players get heavier when they retire. Football players get smaller because they're not filling themselves with testosterone and whatever they have to take in order to get them ready on Sunday, Mondays, and Thursdays. For Carmelo Anthony and the Blazers, first they got to get the A spot. Let's not overlook Ja Morant, who did a terrific job of cementing his team for and the way she dissects everything that's happening in the world of pop culture and entertainment. And I love that hoodie. Welcome to the program. We've been trying to get the Harriet Tubman 20s put in circulation forever. What do you think happened to him?
Well, Donald Trump happened to him, and so did his administration under the leadership of the Secretary of the Treasury. That is Steve Mnuchin. They decided to delay this. And so my friend Mina Harris, who also runs the Phenomenal campaign, came up with Harriet Tubman being on our T-shirts. And maybe some of us should just get the stamp and stamp her face all over Andrew Jackson.
Well, that is awesome. This weekend, we lost an all-time icon, a great in Mr. John Lewis, who did so much for the civil rights movement. Can you talk about his impact in his life and legacy?
Well, I first want to just say I'm just so thankful for Mr. Lewis and who he represented to me personally. I was the Congressional Black Caucus Executive Director and General Counsel and had the great privilege of not only working with Mr. Lewis and his team. He has a phenomenal team who I know he's looking down from heaven and is so proud of. But he isn't just a civil rights hero to so many of us who walked across a bridge and risked his life for us to vote. He is also was also an amazing human being. Every single week, the Congressional Black Caucus holds a lunch. And Mr. Lewis, and it's a lunch meeting, and Mr. Lewis would come to those meetings late so that he could just eat lunch with the staff. And I will dearly, dearly miss him. Another one of my favorite memories of him. And I just think it's important to bring the humanity back to the hero. So I'll also tell you this, we held a jobs fair initiative while I was the Congressional Black Caucus ED with the phenomenal team, Latrice, Brandon, and Stephanie, under the chairmanship of Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver. We went to 5 cities. One of those cities was Atlanta. And the response was so large, you guys, because Black folks were not working. I mean, double the national unemployment always, but these numbers were remarkably high. And we went to Atlanta, held this job fair, lines literally wrapped around the block. People's cars were backed up on the highway. And Mr. Lewis was like, they need water. It's hot outside. He grabs this case of water and he's going out to hand water out to these folks. And that's him. He was always serving, whether it was public service, doing a sit-in on the House floor, or was ensuring people who were in the hot sun just waiting in line for a job could get a drink of water. That was Mr. Lewis. So he's dearly missed, and I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to work with him.
Angela, we are on the verge of the beginning of the NBA season. The teams are down in Orlando in the bubble, and there's been a lot of discussion about how players from the bubble can use that platform to continue the fight against social injustice. What advice would you have for them?
Well, first, I just want to shout out my very good friend, Chris Paul, who, of course, is the Players Association president, who is not forgetting the important role they have, not only with bully pulpits, what they say and press, what they're wearing on their attire. I know they have a partnership that they've just announced with Russell Westbrook, where they're intending to ensure there's, all types of social justice messaging and framing on their clothing items. I know that Black Lives Matter will be on the court. And so we're not going to lose sight of what's important to us. And I know the players won't. When you look at the demographics of the league, right, this is something that they can't separate themselves from. There are players who have been stopped and harassed and have had violent incidents with police officers. This is not lost upon them. And so I want to just applaud them for the work they're doing while they're going forth and playing. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but if they are going to play, I at least want them to do it that way. So I commend them for that. And I hope that they won't just put Black Lives Matter on the court. They will ensure that our lives matter, our economics matter, and that the demographics of the league's leadership matters, and that the players continue to hold the league's feet to the fire around that. All of those things are important. Don't just do this for a marketing moment for what's trending. Make sure that your practices change as well. And I have every bit of confidence that the players will do the right thing.
I'm actually glad you went there, because you talked about basically leaning towards them not playing. I was one person that made the argument that now NBA players are so very powerful that if they decided not to play, they would create more of a platform than actually playing. Do you feel like them playing and in some of their voices becomes a distraction to the movement of social justice, because now we're going to be talking about their statistics and now about their equality?
Well, Jalen, this is honestly, it has been a hot topic. And what I will tell you is I really do see both sides now. Just for example, the news and what's being covered on cable news, nightly local news, a lot of that coverage has shifted already, right? So at first I was like, you're going to take attention away from what's being covered on the news. The reality of it is there's a new COVID spike. So our social justice issues and our survival hasn't been front and center anyway, unfortunately, over the last week or so. What I think is imperative is that they find a way, just like we have to in our work, right, to integrate key talking points to ensure that they're pushing for societal change, both internally and externally. At some point, we have to make that change and that switch. At some point, we have to evolve into a more robust conversation, not just about police reform, but what it's going to take for Black people to really thrive in this country. So it's going to happen anyway. I was definitely on your side, like, no, don't go play. But now I think the reality of it is at some point that's going to change. And who knows, like, given what's happening with COVID, they may find themselves in a situation where they can't anyway. So the question will become, how do we keep our issues front and center in the face of another pandemic, which is COVID, also hitting us just as hard, actually harder?
It's a good point. Now, we turn our attention to the WNBA, which is also in Florida, about to start their season. And Atlanta Dream team owner and Senator Kelly Loeffler spoke out against the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, if you were a player on that team, called your phone, what advice would you give them about how they should proceed with their season?
First, I would continue to demand that she sells her shares to that team. She does not deserve to be an owner in the WNBA. She does not deserve to have a seat at the table where more than 68% of the players are Black. How dare she blaspheme this movement? How dare she use her platform, both as a senator and as someone in leadership in the WNBA as an owner, to speak ill of the Black Lives Matter movement? We are out here trying to survive, right? And for my friends, Opal, Patrice, and Alicia, who have risked their lives with this movement by creating it, who are threatened every single day, how dare she? That's what I would say. And I would continue to tell the women, not just on that team, but the players on other teams, to push for her to be removed. She actually does not represent the values of the WNBA. She is ill-informed about Black Lives Matter, and I require that people in leadership have more information than the layperson, right? She should know what she's talking about before she opens her mouth. And perhaps if she focused on her own personal ethics, she was just under ethics investigation in the Senate for potentially an insider trading deal. They dropped those charges, but maybe if she paid more attention to her own business, she wouldn't be in ours meddling and blaspheming what this movement is really about.
As I mentioned at the top of this show, as I mentioned when you first joined us, your Harriet Tubman hoodie is fly. There was a gentleman yesterday speaking into a microphone that gave new definition to the sunken place. And he had the nerve to even invoke her name, which is blasphemous. What is going on with Kanye West?
Child, I don't know. Like, the truth is, I really don't know. It's traumatizing. It really is really sad to see Jalen. Kanye has traditionally been one of my favorite MCs. And I like, his song will come on and I'll just turn it now. I just can't. And I think that my biggest frustration is I don't know if he knows how harmful he's being to the culture right now. I don't even know if he's making that connection. And so part of me, like the heart part of me, feels like broken for him. Like, what happened to you and how can we get this right? The other part of me feels like, how can we ensure that we use what's happening with Kanye West to inform people, especially in our community, who avoid mental health and talking about it like the plague? How can we use this to say, if you're not well and you go out and try to lead other people, you're going to put other people in harm's way? And I think that he has to understand that with the price of greatness comes responsibility. And if you're not well, sit down. Really, like, you have to sit down somewhere and get a hold of whatever's going on in your mind. I think that, people can support whomever they want politically. I never understood why he was supporting Trump, but I was worried then, and I think that the truth of the matter is there are some things that are, going on inside of him, an inherent conflict, an internal conflict that he really needs to wrestle with a mental health professional. And I'm not a mental health professional, but I'm concerned greatly about his mental health.
Angela, thank you so much for joining and giving your perspective. When we come back, a coach in the NBA thinks the next super team will be developed in Orlando, and I'm not talking about the Magic. We'll explain. Right? Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby. Jalen, an NBA coach, is prophesizing that everyone being together in this tight community in Orlando, in the bubble, will lead to some little tampering situation that will lead to the next NBA super team. Do you think this could be true?
All-star level players, yes. All NBA caliber players, probably. But MVP level players, I don't believe so. Because those guys, Giannis, Luka, Dame Dollar, they come to mind, Jason Tatum, I don't see them leaving their current situation. The Lakers already have a duo, so do Houston, so do the Clippers, and so do the Sixers. And so I probably see a couple of guys joining, but not necessarily with the connotation of the word super team.
Jalen, you and I have discussed the NBA barbershop situation, and now we have the very first images of that exact NBA barbershop. Number one, it should have been built earlier, I feel like. And number two, it looks small. So it's not like every player is going to be able to fly in their own barber. I think it's going to be just probably a handful of barbers that take care of everybody, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I don't think it's going to since it's in the bubble, it's not going to have the same connotation that it does in the neighborhood, where the barber shop is a hub for different ages and groups of people to kind of congregate and learn about the community and the culture. But I'm glad the NBA is doing so.
And Jalen, it was Stuart Scott's birthday yesterday. You wanted to make sure to send a message to him today.
Rest in peace, Stuart Scott. We talked a lot about Jalen and Jacoby, this program right here. And you continue to encourage me. And you said that we'd be on ESPN one day. Rest in peace, my brother, as we sign off on ESPN today.
And we will be back on ESPN tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Highly Questionable is up next.